Well, thank you all, and thanks, Rick, for that introduction. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of the budget, we did want to just take a quick moment to talk about our Political Action Committee. I think many of you on the call do know that we as an association have a three-prong approach to advocacy. Our first arm is direct lobbying, and we as an association really have established a strong direct lobbying operation. We have 6 registered lobbyists and really a constant presence during the legislative process. The second prong is member advocacy, and that's why today is so important. We have more than 100 attendees who are participating in today's programming and visiting with legislators throughout the rest of the week. And even though we had to sort of roll with the times here and move to a virtual platform this year, we are really seeing incredible levels of engagement from members like you. So once again, I first want to take a moment to thank you for being here and being engaged. And second, just a reminder that while this week is just so critical for our member advocacy campaign, even after this week, there will be some really critical opportunities for member engagement with your legislators throughout the legislative process. And lastly, what brings us to this slide is the third arm of our political advocacy campaign, and that is political giving. And it really is critical that we're players on the political giving front, and these 3 aspects together are all so important, and really we can't see one be successful without the other. And so I think you can tell by our little thermometer here that we've seen some strong fundraising numbers for our PAC to start this year. And we would ask that you help us build on that momentum and build this important aspect of our outreach plan. And you can go to whcaycal.org/PAC today to learn more and to donate. And thank you for your consideration. Next slide, please. So we wanted to give just a very brief history of how we've arrived at where we are today. We were very pleased and encouraged when Governor Tony Evers convened the Governor's Task Force on Caregiving, which met throughout 2020. And that group included really a vast array of diverse stakeholders, including long-term care providers. And it was tasked with discussing ways and finding solutions so that the state can address the long-term care workforce crisis. We as an association, we were really pleased to see the task force propose some really important increases for both nursing facility, Medicaid reimbursement, and family care funding. And so once the task force later last year introduced these proposals, we at that point as an association turned our attention and our advocacy to the governor as he and his team began to craft the biennial state budget that he would be proposing. And we requested of Governor Evers to incorporate those really important funding provisions from his task force on caregiving into his version of the budget. And we were really pleased come mid-February when the governor introduced his version of the budget, and it included some really significant funding increases for long-term care. And you can see some of the details on a high level here on this slide. As it relates to nursing home Medicaid reimbursement, the governor's budget proposal would provide an 11.5% increase to the nursing home rates in fiscal year 2022, and an additional 11.7% increase in fiscal year 23, which in total invests more than $240 million over the biennium. For family care, the budget proposal from the governor would provide an additional $77 million in funding for family care. And it would also direct DHS to develop a statewide minimum rate band. Additionally, the budget proposal from the governor includes $77 million over the biennium for personal care services, and also includes some really important non-funding related provisions that we were really encouraged by, including a direction to the Department of Health Services to develop a pilot program for training options within the caregiving profession, including a career ladder leading towards CNA certification. and also a proposal to address the benefits cliff issue. So that is a brief overview of the budget that the governor has proposed. And before I pass it off to Kate to go into a little more detail on our budget ask, just a little more background on, again, where we are and where we'll be in the next few weeks. So again, today and this week, it really is just such a critical part of our member advocacy campaign. This week, we will virtually descend on dozens of legislative offices to talk about long-term care providers' priorities in the budget. And there are certainly next steps, and there's much more work to be done after this week. So after this week, we will ask that you as members and as providers remain engaged beyond legislative day. The legislature's Joint Finance Committee will be holding several public listening sessions throughout the month of April across the state, and they will be holding a virtual budget listening session on April 28th. So we will be working with members and encouraging you all to attend and participate in those events. So we hope this gives you a good overview of where we are and why your advocacy is so important. A little later this morning, after our esteemed legislative presenters and the governor are able to speak to you about their priorities and about how long-term care works into our shared priorities, we'll spend some time talking about really what is in the packets, the virtual packets that we'll be presenting to legislators over the next few days. But before we get there, this morning, I'll now pass it over to Kate Dixon to discuss our funding requests in some greater detail. Kate.
Good morning. Thanks, Jim. Good morning. I'm Kate Dixon, the Director of Reimbursement Policy for WHCA-YCAL. As you heard from Jim, we're feeling very optimistic about what is included in the governor's version of the budget. The budget asks for both family care and Medicaid that WHCA-YCAL advocated for, included provisions that came directly from the governor's own task force on caregiving. And as Jim mentioned, that task force was created specifically to provide recommendations in various caregiving areas. And we're happy that many of those requests were honored in the governor's version of the budget. Later this morning, we will be talking more in depth about how to conduct a legislative visit, and that will involve instructions on where to find and how to share the documents that I'm about to discuss and reference with your legislator. Next slide, please. So we'll start with family care and go a little bit more in depth about our combined ask with the other state provider associations. We continue to feel that it is important to ask that any funding put into the family care program goes specifically into the direct care workforce program, which, as you know, goes directly to the provider and can't be absorbed by the MCO. So that is what you'll see in our budget request for family care. Specifically, that $15 million GPR per year is added to the direct care workforce program. That $15 million GPR plus the federal matching dollars comes out to the aforementioned $77 million in the governor's budget. And then in addition to the monetary ask on the family care side, we're also asking for some policies that would modernize reimbursement, specifically that the state develops a statewide minimum rate band structure that will help ensure transparency and more accurately reflect the rising costs of care that providers are facing. On the Medicaid side, our budget requests include asking that 94.6 million GPR is added to support nursing homes over the biennium as included in the governor's budget. This plus the federal matching funds is approximately $240 million total over the biennium. And as Jim mentioned, is an 11.5% increase in year one, and then an additional 11.7% in the second year. Next slide, please. Accompanying our budget ask documents, also included in your resources for speaking with your legislators, will be a Medicaid shortfall summary pictured here. that will be specific to your legislative district. As you can see here, this document includes facilities in the district. It has their Medicaid percentage as well as their Medicaid shortfall for the 2019-2020 year. There is a total for that specific district. And then at the bottom, there's also a grand total for the state, which is a shortfall of about $295 million total. And then an average per day loss of 78.55. These shortfall numbers are consistently among the worst in the country, if not the worst. These will be very helpful numbers to reference in your meetings and to show your legislators exactly what's going on in their district. Thank you.